Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited today to talk about the best books I read in 2021. I am filming this a little bit early, so it's not quite the end of the year, but if I read something around the end of the year and I'm like, oh my god, I love this sort of should have been in this video, then I'll shout it out in another video. So it's totally fine. It's okay. I read a lot of awesome books in 2021 and I really had a hard time whittling down to the top 10, but I did it. I'm going to be sharing these in no particular order until I get to the final, which will be my absolute #1 favorite of the year. And the others will be in no particular order. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. The first book I'm going to talk about is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This is about Ellery Downing, who lives in settler times in fantasy type world, and strange things are happening in her town. Animals are being born wrong. Disputes and conflicts are rising between townsfolk and family members that weren't there before. She also notices that her family, starts acting strange as well, and they live next to this impenetrable forest that is rumored to have these monsters within it. And when this hunting party goes out and they're all slaughtered, it becomes this building dread and terror. What I love about Small Favors is I think it is so good at atmosphere and dread and slowly building up concern through little things that keep building and getting bigger and getting bigger and getting bigger. It's really latching on to the dark desires of people and what people are willing to do to get the things that they want. There's also a large focus on family because Ellery is having to take care of her siblings because of something that happens, and she is having to kind of take on that sort of not even motherly, but a leadership role at a young age and deal with all this stuff that's happening. She's having some conflict with her best friend and her brother. And I just think this story does such a good job at that. It's so I kept wanting to read on because I was so intrigued by everything that was happening. And every time a creepy thing happened, I was like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? And I loved the townsfolk because a big part of this is fueled by rumors and people talking about people and people going behind other people's backs. And I love that sort of just human drama. And there's a romance in this as well that I thought was really, really sweet. I really liked it. And Ellery is she's a sort of character where I really felt for her and her plight. And of course they run a honeybee farm, which is also really, I love the aesthetic of the bees. Of course, in the book, you can see that as well. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I really recommend it. I think this was really definitely one of the top horrors I read this year. Next is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. I loved this. This was I read this. This was an earlier release of the year that I just absolutely blew me away. It really set a very positive tone for the year. But this is about C, who wakes up on a beach with no memory of her past life, but she knows she has a sister and she has to find her. And then we also have a second POV, which is Casey, who lives in these fancy eco cities that are very concerned with environmental impact, and so you can't really physically go anywhere, so you have to go everywhere virtually. And she's also a STEM prodigy, and she's kind of deciding whether she wants to use her knowledge to help humanity or if she's kind of over it because she's kind of struggling. And it's their two POVs, and kind of seeing how they end up being connected to each other. So I just absolutely love this. So this is a sci-fi. So it is I would say it's dystopian fiction, which I miss dystopian so much, and I just wish publishing would go back to pushing dystopian, but I thought this was so fresh for dystopian. I feel dystopian books of the past, you know, Hunger Games and Divergent, etc., I felt like this felt different than them. It didn't feel like it was trying to emulate something that we had already seen. It was doing something really fresh and interesting, and I loved the discussions about environmental impact and like climate change, things that are like you know, even though they're in a sci-fi book, they're very close to real life. I really enjoyed all of that. There were like twists and turns in here. Like there were some things that I was kind of like, I feel like this is what's gonna happen. And then there were a bunch of things I was completely blindsided by. It was so cool to see those twists. And I felt it had a really interesting ending. Like when I finished the book, I was sitting there with it and I was just like, processing it, because it felt so layered and deep and multifaceted, and I was just like really drawn into it. I think the writing is really engaging. I think both POVs are really interesting. I find that sometimes when I read dual POV books, I am much more interested in one point of view than the other, to the point where when I read from the other point of view, I'm like, ugh. But this, like, both points of views were so interesting and like their own way. They both had such different qualities to them, and I really was so engaged in finding out what was happening in each point of view. And so I definitely recommend this for sci-fi fans and people who are missing dystopian. Next up is Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. This is an adult horror that I kept hearing come up as like a horror to read. And so I was like, okay, I gotta get on that. So it's about Marjorie, who is a teenager. She kind of starts acting out and having issues, and the family is like, okay, you must be possessed. And there's more of a lead up to it, but that's like basically the consensus that they come to, is that she's possessed. And so they sign on for this reality TV show that is documenting their lives and documenting Marjorie's possession. And so where the story begins is 15 years later, with Mary, who is Marjorie's younger sister, with her doing interviews with an author who's wanting to write about their story. So her doing interviews with her to basically talk about what happened to the family. So the format is like, there's interviews with Mary, there's some blog posts by a blogger, which is really interesting. And then there is the flashbacks of the family during that time, during the taping of the reality show. And it's all from Mary's point of view. So like, I mean, the interviews and the flashbacks are from Mary's point of view. So the younger sister observing what is happening to her older sister. And this book was like, this is a wild ride. I love haunted house stories, and I love possession stories. And well, not possession stories, exorcism stories, that to be specific. I love exorcism stuff. So I was really excited for this. And there is this constant thread of like, is she actually possessed or is she not? And you're watching this breakdown of the family as they deal with both what is happening with their oldest daughter and what is happening with the reality TV show, and what's happening between family members, and Mary dealing with being quite a younger sibling, because she's quite a bit younger than her older sister. So I think Marjorie's like 16 and Mary's like 7 or something like that. So she's quite a bit younger, and her dealing with like being the younger sibling, and like her sister changing, and like the attention of reality shows, and like how that skews with things. And it's just it gets so wild, man. It gets so wild. So many things happen where you're reading and you're like, what is happening right now? And I just think it's such a perfect, I almost feel like this book was for me. It's just so perfect between the reality TV show, between the possession, between the complicated family dynamics, between the different formats. I definitely think if you're wanting to find a good adult horror, I would definitely check this one out. I just think it's so good at building the tension, building the mystery, and finishing and still having you guess things and question and wonder. So would definitely recommend, definitely one of my top reads of the year. Next is Redemptor by Jordan Nefueco. This is the second book in the Ray Bear series. It's also the final book. I have the special Illumicrate version because I really wanted it because it has the sprayed edges. It's so pretty. I loved Ray Bear, so I was really excited for the conclusion of this series. So I won't say too much synopsis wise in case it spoils the first book, but essentially Teresai is dealing with consequences of things that she promised in the first book. You get more of that found family aspect of her working together with her Ray siblings. I can't remember if that's the word they use for them, but like her siblings that all have the Ray and they help the Ray Bear. It's this makes more sense if you read the synopsis for the first book. But I really loved this as a conclusion, as a second and final book. I really felt for Teresai's plight and how she was dealing with her new responsibilities and how she was struggling with things that she had promised and trying to fulfill those things, of trying to live up to expectations, of really taking a lot on her shoulders and kind of becoming isolated in the process, and her struggling through that. I thought that was really cool. Well, not really cool, but like it was really engaging and I felt for her. And I loved the way that the other characters in the story came into this. Like they had their own struggles that they were working through as well, and getting to see how they interacted with each other. And so many, like, there were things that were like good twists that like I was only predicting once it was about to happen. You know, when you predict something at the right time because the author wants you to know what it is by that point. That's where I really caught on to things, and that was great, but there were still some surprises. And I just felt like this was such a wonderful, heartfelt finale. I did cry at the end because it was very emotional. And I just think this is such a fantastic series. I think if you are wanting to read a high fantasy series, the Ray Bear series is absolutely one you should check out. This is such a fantastic fantasy duology. Next is No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull. This book is an adult, I don't even know what to say genre-wise. I have it listed as a horror because that's kind of how I was pitched it. As like a horror, it's like an urban contemporary fantasy, it's like a bunch of things. It's very difficult to pin down. And I think this is one of those books where it's almost better to know less going into it. So I'll do a synopsis very briefly, but essentially what happens is that there are a group of, and this is simplifying it, there's a group of werewolves and they expose themselves to the world. So they show themselves, and then suddenly the world is aware that there are monsters among them, and there are also gods among them, and it's all of those people, those monsters and gods, dealing with the fallout of that happening. Yeah, essentially that's pretty much it. This book was like one of those books where I read and I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm really enjoying it. Like I feel like I wasn't quite smart enough to grasp everything that was happening in the novel, but I was so engaged in everything. I thought it was so interesting. There's a lot of representation of people of color and LGBTQIA plus people. And the intersections between, there's like the timeline is all over the place, so it's like very non-chronological. Different people have different abilities that like affect how they're working together. There are different factions of like monsters and gods and how they're working together to do different things. I do think like the horror thing is like, it's hard. It's so hard with genre for this book, but there are some like disturbing type scenes, but it's also like it delves so deep into the relationships between people and like that emotion and that connection, and that's not lost in the more, you know, sort of flashy fantasy or horror elements. It's just I don't even really know how to describe why this is so good, but it's so good. It's just like, it's so complicated. It's so interesting. It feels so fresh. I find the style of writing to be like, it's appealing to me. And I do find it to be accessible, even when it's kind of like waxing poetic. Yeah, I just thought this was so good, and I'm so bad at describing why it's so good, but it's just like, it's so good. So if you read the synopsis for it and you were interested, I would recommend reading it. Next is Daughters on Two Devils by Amy Lukavics. I can't remember exactly where, but I remember Beautifully Bookish Bethany, whose like channel I'll link down below. She was talking about like Amy Lukavics being a very underrated author, and I was searching through my library app one day for like horror audiobooks that I could read, just ones that were available that I could read right away, and I saw this pop up and I saw Amy Lukavics and I was like, oh yeah, Bethany said that like she was pretty underrated. So I decided to read this book. It is a young adult horror. It is about 16-year-old Amanda, who is pregnant. She finds out she's pregnant, and when she tells the boy and hopes to run away with him, he's basically like, lol, not my kid, and basically snubs her. And she lives in like settler times. It's like 1800s-ish, around that time, and so her family's very strict, and she knows if they find out that she's pregnant, that they will throw her out, and the winters are really, really bad where she lives, so like she would die. Or she would be living very hard, things would be difficult for her, so she decides to hide the pregnancy. Her mom has just had a child, and they're having a lot of difficulty with the child. They don't know how to soothe the child, who's born both deaf and blind, and so that's causing friction within the family because they're trying to figure out how to soothe the child and help the child, and they don't know how to do it, so the child's crying all the time. And they decide to move, so they have to move from their house to a different house, because they think the winters are going to be better there. And when they get to the house, there's like blood on the floor. It's like the dad is like, it's fine, it's probably an animal, let's clean it up. Anyway, really creepy things start happening. Things just go off the wall. Like the way this book escalates is unreal. I definitely agree with this author being underrated because this is such a good book. You know, there's things about the devil and possession, which I've established now that I really enjoy. And it creates this complicated dynamic within the family as well, because the one daughter's hiding her pregnancy. She ends up, the younger daughter basically finds out, and then there's a conflict between them. And there's just like a lot of stuff going on, essentially in this book, but it's so creepy. There's so much dread. There's so much just like disturbing things that end up happening. And yeah, it's just like, if you are like a horror fan, like I definitely recommend this book because it's such a wild ride. The next one is Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I read Starfish by this author, which I absolutely loved and was like so emotional over and cried. And of course I cried at this one too. But this is about Rumi and Rumi's younger sister Leah. They were in a car crash and her sister died. And so it's just her and her mom, but her mom is having such a hard time with her grief that she sends Rumi to live with her aunt in Hawaii, and Rumi is dealing with trying to overcome she's experiencing the grief of having lost her sister. They would write songs together, and they started writing this song together called Summer Bird Blue that they didn't get to finish, and she's trying to finish it for her sister, but she's really struggling with her grief and also with having her mom, feeling that her mom has abandoned her in this time and left her alone to deal with it. So this book is like 100%, 120% about grief. So if like you do not want that, that might be really heavy for you, but I just found it to be so beautiful. I think Akemi Don Bowman has such wonderful writing. It's so emotional. You become so connected to these characters. I really felt for Rumi, even when Rumi was doing things where I was like, oh, you're being so mean to other people, but you understand why she's doing that and why she's acting like that, and you can feel the struggle of her even as she realizes that she's hurting people, not being able to stop herself and not being able to stop being angry and going through those different emotions, and also trying to complete this song, trying to do this thing with her sister that they always did together, and to now try and do that apart from her. You also get flashbacks to like the before. So before her sister died, you get flashbacks into what her life was like then and how she felt about her sister and things like that, while also being in the present day time. And I just thought it's just such a beautiful, emotional novel. I cried again. I cried so much in this book. But it was just, everything was so heartbreaking and absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and I just loved every minute of it. Next is Summer Suns by Lee Mandelow. So this is an adult Southern Gothic slash horror, and it's about Andrew and Eddie. So Andrew and Eddie were best friends, and Eddie went off to university, and then he was like, Andrew was supposed to come join him, but before he can join him, Eddie dies by suicide, and Andrew's like, he would never do that, so he ends up coming to the school and living with Eddie's roommates and trying to figure out what happened to him. This book, it's so chaotic in the best way. It's so chaotic in the best way because Andrew is a complete mess. He's a huge mess. He has no idea what he's doing with his life. He's just like gets in the messiest situations. It's just like he's so chaotic in trying to figure out this mystery. Like he's like the worst detective. And he's also like dealing with the other roommates. He like, he's dealing with like figuring out his sexuality, and like he's grieving the loss of his best friend. He's also examining their relationship that they had and like kind of the flaws along with it, and like he's dealing with anger against his friend as well. He's dealing with this mystery of like what happened to him and feeling that he was murdered and trying to figure that out, while also just dealing with being messy on his own. And it's just like, it's so good. I feel like this is a sort of book where like you just have to go with the vibes. It's about the vibes. I think that's the strongest part of the book, is the vibes and the characterization and those intimate relationships between the characters. I feel like that's really the huge strength of the book, and that's what I enjoyed the most about the book. I think the mystery solving aspect is kind of more secondary. Also, Andrew has this sort of ability in which kind of skeletons kind of attack him and try and kill him on a regular basis that he's dealing with. I can't even figure out I don't even know how to like adequately describe why you should read this book, but I think if you really enjoy like the atmosphere of like a Southern Gothic, you enjoy complicated character drama, you enjoy some creepy elements, I think those are really things to lean into with the book. I think if you're really focused on like plot elements, I really don't think that's like what the book is about, is what I will say. I don't think it's about the plot. I think it's about the characters and the feels. So that's what I loved about it. I just thought it was so fantastic, and I had a wonderful time reading it. I couldn't put it down. I was listening to audio, but I was like, when I wasn't listening to the audio, I was thinking about wanting to listen to the audio. So it's just like, it's so good. If you have been counting, we are at number 9, but we're actually at number 1. So I have 2 books that were tied for my number 1 read of the year. I just like couldn't decide between them because they were both my absolute favorite reads of 2021 for their own reasons. But I'm going to start with the first one, and that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This is about Vania Schmidt, who is a thief in more than one way. So she steals jewels and valuables from the wealthy, and she has also stolen a princess's identity. So she's posing as a princess using an enchanted necklace. She's also the goddaughter of Death and Fortune, who are both lower gods, and they want her to be her servant, but she absolutely refuses to. So this posing as a princess and stealing from nobles is a way for her to build her own future. However, she messes with the nobles who worship a lower god, and the lower god curses her to turn into a pile of jewels by the next, I believe, full moon cycle it is, unless she's able to atone for her misdeeds. So this book is so amazing. I absolutely loved it. I just like couldn't get enough of it. It also has like these gorgeous illustrations that the author did. I want to show you one of them. These just like amazing illustrations in the book that the author did. And this is a young adult high fantasy, I should mention that. And it's set in a German inspired sort of world. And what I love about it is the characters are amazing. So for one, Vania as like a main character, she's so wonderful. She's funny. She's flawed. She's like got her bad moments, she's got her good moments, and it's so funny. Like it was really unexpected to me like how hilarious so much of this book was. Like I just had such a fun time reading it. Even though there are some like heavy difficult moments, I feel like they're really well balanced with really funny entertaining moments. There's a lot of action adventure moments where they're like having to, you know, pull off sort of heists, and there's a wonderful ensemble cast. It's like a found family sort of ensemble cast, which I really love. They all had their own unique character arcs that were really well developed and well done. They all had such like interesting parts of their personality. One of the characters, Ragne, who is the daughter of the lower god that curses Vania, she like follows her around to make sure like that Vania is doing what she's supposed to and to like help her if she needs to. And she's just like the most precious character. I just loved her so much. And it was just like such a good book. And there are so many like ups and downs and betrayals and discoveries. And I just absolutely loved it. It's just such a fun, amazing, entertaining, and unique book. Like it's so hard, I find, in high fantasy to really be doing a unique twist on a story, but this really does. And it's also fun because there are chapters that read like a fairy tale to share more about Vania's backstory. And I just find those to be like so wonderful for the atmosphere of the book. It's such a rich world. It's so interesting. And I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. And last but not least, this is my other number 1 read of the year. And that is Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao. This is just amazing. It's a young adult sci-fi. It's about Zetian, who basically lives in a world in which women do not really have much of a choice in their lives. They can either get married or they can become concubines for basically these like giant mecha robots that are piloted by young men. And the young men basically end up they need the women for energy to help them pilot the machine, but they almost always end up overpowering the women, who then die in the mechas. And so they are continuously basically sent off to do this as a means of like, you know, making a life for themselves, and then they die essentially. And so Zetian, her sister, was one of those concubines, and she decides to join essentially to get revenge on the pilot, so the young man that was piloting the mecha. And these mechas, they're fighting basically an alien race that is like threatening to basically eradicate the humans. And inspired by the, I believe the first female emperor of China is, I believe, the inspiration. And yeah, it's just, Iron Widow is such a fun book, and I feel like this is like very similar to when I was talking about Little Thieves. I just like the joy that this book gave me. It talks about, and it really, like, I talk about the joy, but it does talk about like some very difficult topics. But what I loved about the book is that it was just so much fun to read. Like, the story was so fun to follow. And it was like really wild and bonkers in some points, but it's just so entertaining. And Zetian as a main character is really entertaining to follow. You know, she's really like hell-bent on revenge and doing whatever is necessary, not only to, you know, avenge her sister's life, but for her own life. And she's really headstrong in that way, but she's also very flawed, and she definitely has her own insecurities and that like more vulnerable side to her. So it's not the sort of thing, you know, with the strong female protagonists where they're always strong all the time. She definitely has her own flaws. I thought the romance, there's a polyamorous romance in this book, I thought it was really sweet, and it was really like, what's the word? Likeable? I don't know, that's not even the right word. But I really liked both of the characters, and it was just like such a fun, wild ride. I also really enjoyed the world. Like, I think the world was put together in a really interesting way. I love the giant mecha. I love a mecha, so I really appreciated that. And I also liked all the different conversations about class as well. So class beyond, you know, gender enforced class. And also there are some discussions as well about gender. And it was just really cool. I really enjoyed this. I'm so excited to see like young adult sci-fi that does really well, because it's like sci-fi isn't dead, like revival of sci-fi. So I absolutely just love this book. I thought it was so fantastic, and I really recommend it if you're like a sci-fi fan, because it was just so much fun and super cool. And that was it for the 10 best books I read in 2021. I'm sure this video has become so much longer than I ever thought it would be because of all of my gushing. But I really like these 10 books. I had such a wonderful time reading, and I had so many other books, like I had other books that I also really enjoyed this year that were like faves of the year, and even books that weren't faves of the year that were just like books that I really enjoyed. So I had such a wonderful reading year in 2021, and I'm looking forward to hopefully an even better reading year in 2022. If you could comment down below and share some of your favorite books that you read this year, that would be awesome. Then we can all be giving each other recommendations, and that will be super fun. And I'm also looking forward to, on this channel, talking more about books. I will just be like talking about them in a positive way. There won't be really any negative critique, but I also just enjoy that it's going to give me a chance to chat more about the books I've been loving and enjoying on this channel. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!